What's going on, everybody? We are just a few weeks away from the kickoff of the 2024-25 college football season with week 0 matchups. The main one being Florida State versus Georgia Tech, I believe, in Ireland. So with that going on, we have got a ton of fall camp updates. So fall camp show is back, volume 1, right after the state. All right, let's get into it. I am excited to be back bringing you guys this information, and we are going to talk mainly about the ACC and the Big 12 today. We're going to start with Boston College. Thomas Castellanos is getting a ton of love currently from his practice report updates, not even just because of what he does as a rushing threat, but a lot of the stuff is actually talked about how poised he's looked in the pocket. He has handled pressure well, known when to step up, delivering some big passes to one wide receiver, Jaden McCowan, we are going to talk about as well. In being kind of the guy who's really stepped up. He has actually come out and said that he wanted to come play for Boston College because of what they have developed over the past couple of years, specifically, Zay Flowers being the main one going in the first round to the Baltimore Ravens. Said that he sees a lot of his game similar to Zay Flowers and wants to be developed that way. That's why he transferred into Boston College, and they have seemed to really like him. They have used him a lot as a deep threat, and they've even talked about moving him around the formation. Bill O'Brien was very complimentary of him recently. On the running back room, real quick, Kyle Robichek has worked mostly with the second team, with Trayshawn Ward being with the first. And why that is interesting is Thomas Castellanos has not been afraid to check the ball down to Ward. In fact, there's been a lot of discussion about that on how often he has gone to Ward, and Ward has apparently looked really good, especially in the open field with the speed and agility and making players miss. So something to look out for, Thomas Castellanos possibly dumping the ball off to Trayshawn Ward. A lot of people thought it was going to be, Kyle Robichek maybe being the guy. Sounds like Trayshawn Ward is the one running with the first and been fairly impressive. Moving on over to Cal. So through a couple days here, I believe they're on day 4 right now. The big talk has been one Ohio State transfer, Keon Grays. Now, some of the reports have been that they don't really see him being a massive part of this passing attack until 2025, but they think he could be an extremely dangerous weapon in 2025. Also transferred in wide receiver Tobias Merriweather, has been by far the number one wide receiver through camp, but he has a history with Keon Grays and has talked about how excited he is to play with him. It really seems like it's been those two who have kind of taken over the current, what has been for the past 2 days run with the ones has been Merriweather, Grays, and Anderson, with tight end Corey Dyches being there as well at the tight end spot, and has been extremely impressive. The main talk about him the other day was this diving catch that he made, which apparently was like setting everybody on fire. So Cal sounding like they could be a very interesting offense. There still is technically a battle right now between Fernando Mendoza and Chandler Rogers, who transferred in from UNT. It sounds like for the most part, Mendoza is leading the battle, but there have been reports over the past couple of days that he hasn't been good enough to kind of take the job and really pull away from Rogers. He's had a couple bad days when Rogers has had good ones, so it is still technically a battle. So we'll see what happens with that. I think Mendoza is going to end up coming away with it, but it is quote unquote a battle currently. Moving on over to Clemson. So as of the recording of this video, they've only had one practice in full pads. And Christopher Vizina has apparently been seen making some pretty good throws over the past couple practices. A guy that we here at Campus Canton we're not very high on, but does seem to be the guy behind Cade Klubnik. So at least for Clemson fans, that's good news to hear. The backup quarterback's making plays. But mainly I wanted to talk about wide receivers Antonio Williams and Tyler Brown. It seems like those are going to be the two guys. The coaching staff has been talking about, they've been the most impressive through the camp. Everybody talking about Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore and the guys that, they are possibly going to be as freshmen. But it really seems like Antonio Williams and Tyler Brown are the guys. So let's not overlook them. They've been talked about a lot here. Brown, they've talked a lot about him being very quick and twitchy as well throughout this camp. Moving on over to Duke, not a lot of reports coming out of Duke. The main one being just Jordan Moore impressing with his hands and ball tracking, the wide receiver. I find it hard to trust too much into him with Malik Murphy at quarterback. We've seen just kind of how erratic he can be at times, but he's been impressive along with Jarquez Moore as well, the running back. So it seems like the two Moores have been really impressive in this offense. Probably the two guys that you are looking out for over on Duke. But again, not much else really coming out of the camp. We've got a lot here with Florida State. My bad. We have a lot here with Florida State. I was meaning to pull up the report and kick myself off there. So we are into practice. I believe this is practice 11. They are currently in Jacksonville right now. Since practice 8, leading up into a scrimmage, what they just had this past Saturday, freshman quarterback Luke Kromenhoek has been extremely impressive. Not only using his legs, but most importantly, displaying his arm talent and layering throws over defenders, buying time in the pocket, and throwing some really impressive throws with velocity into the end zone. It sounds like, for the most part, Brock Glenn is still locked in as the backup, but he has struggled over those past couple practices early on through through fall camp. Brock Glenn was even, reports where he was outplaying DJ and could possibly even, I don't know that he would have been the starter, but reports where he was outplaying DJ. It seems like he's come back to earth a little bit, and it really is like a battle between him and Luke. Now, I still expect Brock Glenn to be the backup quarterback, but it's definitely good to see, true freshman Luke Kromenhoek at least battling for that. He was listed as an athlete, but I want to bring up Jalen Lucas, who's playing running back for Florida State. They have lined him up in the slot multiple times, and he has been able to really excel on that. He's been in the backfield, caught the ball as well, lining up in slot, catching the ball, and specifically when he gets into the open field, all the talk is of how easy he makes it look in juking defenders. He and wide receiver Jaylen Brown have been massive bright spots apparently for this offense. So probably not a guy we're looking at this year to be something with Toafili there, Roydell Williams. They did bring in Cam Davis as well, true freshman, but maybe a guy to look out for on the horizon. He's like him and Jaylen Brown have gotten a lot of love since about practice 7. I was looking at practice 6 through 12 right now, or 11 reports, and Jalen Lucas has been talked about in almost every single one of them, as well as wide receiver Jaylen Brown. I did want to point out that DJ has been solid since the scrimmage on Saturday, but the reports are that he has not been helping his wide receivers, that he's constantly put the ball in the air when he's needed to utilize his legs. He hasn't really done that, and apparently it was causing Mike Norvell some stress in the scrimmage, but for the most part, they ended up, that side of it ended up winning the scrimmage. So I guess came away okay. Again, I wanted to mention that Brock Glenn, since kind of practice 8, has just not been as sharp as he was as earlier in camp. He's really been struggling with his accuracy and timing, where it seems like Luke Kromenhoek has kind of taken that step forward and actually excelled in that part. So you're kind of seeing the differences early on. True freshman coming in, not looking good. It's kind of stepped up. Brock Glenn taking a little bit of step back. And I did want to also just mention really quick, freshman wide receiver Elijah Moore has had apparently a couple really big, crazy catches, specifically in traffic, going over defensive backs and everything and catching the ball, including getting a big shout out from head coach Mike Norvell. So wide receiver Elijah Moore, not that one in Cleveland, the one in Florida, has been impressing. Heading on over to Georgia Tech, we know Haynes King is going to be the starter, but if you want to invest in the future, it does seem like Zach Pyron is going to be the guy. He's apparently had a really good camp and had a pretty good Saturday in the scrimmage. Has shown a lot of improvement from last season, and then they're just really talking a lot about running back Jamal Haynes and how he continues to really impress in camp. Heading on over to Louisville, there's not a lot going on here except for the wide receivers. A lot of talk about Colin Lacey, who had a really good day on August 7th from this report. Caught several passes, including a long touchdown, and Chris Bell, from multiple reports, just seems like he's going to be the guy. Like, he's been a deep threat. He's been the most often targeted. Sounds like Chris Bell is in for a big, big year in Louisville, which is what we like, right? I mean, Jeff Brom, those wide receiver ones, we want them. Sounds like it's going to be Chris Bell. Heading on over to NC State, actually have a lot here. So Grayson McCall continues to really impress, seems to be a leader in camp. Definitely, seems to have bounced back from the concussion issues he had last year and seems to be like locked in as the guy for NC State, and they're all really excited about it. However, there's a lot of talk about CJ Bailey, and I know Austin and Colin on Campus Life and some other shows on the network have talked a lot about him. He is getting a lot of buzz through camp, and he's getting a lot of love from Grayson McCall as well. Grayson McCall talked about his physical tools are off the charts, that he still is learning the position and has a lot to learn, but with those physical tools, like, he's gonna be the guy. So CJ Bailey getting a lot of love. Grayson McCall, I believe is out of eligibility after this year, so it looks like Bailey's gonna be the guy moving forward. And it sounds like they're really impressed with him. And if Robert Anae stays here, that's a guy you definitely want to invest in. Kevin Concepcion is off to a great start so far. He's making difficult catches. He's making routine. The difficult catches look routine. Apparently, he's looked really good within his routes. Again, this has all just been 1 week of practice, but it's looked really, really good. And seems to be really developing great chemistry with Grayson McCall. Like, those two seem to be on the same page already, according to all the reports. The other standout wide receiver has been Noah Rogers. In fact, when the defense has been focusing in on Concepcion, Rogers has seemed to dominate as well, has really kind of seemed to also be really developing some good chemistry with Grayson McCall, and just seems to be dominating out there. So it really seems like they've got a pretty good 1-2 punch in this offense. I think obviously Concepcion is probably the guy you want from a fantasy perspective, but it is good to see a guy, Noah Rogers, who we thought, was a decent player going to Ohio State, couldn't get on the field, transfers out, going back home in a way. Really, it seemed to kind of step it up and been really good for them throughout the spring and now so far in this fall camp. And I did just want to mention as well, tight end Justin Jolly is getting a lot of love, including them moving him around into different even wide receiver positions at time. They've been flexing him all over the offense. Just seems to be really good. From everything that's been talked about here, seems to be a possible pivotal part of this Robert and I offense. So it's going to be really fun to see what he does. I did want to mention one other player. Again, we know that this offense is going to revolve around Kevin Concepcion and Noah Rogers as long as they stay healthy. But there is one other wide receiver, and he is a freshman, has gotten a ton of talk throughout this camp, and that's Keenan Jackson. Now, he has had some he's had some opportunities due to injuries ahead of him right now throughout the camp, but he has taken a hold of that and looked really good. I mean, obviously, they have some pretty decent depth here on the roster, so I don't know if he's a guy who's going to break year 1-0. I actually don't even know where he ranked. That obviously applies to top 300 players. I don't know if he's in the top 300, but they have said that he's really kind of taken a hold of the opportunity that's been given to him due to the injuries and really shined. Moving on over to North Carolina, it seems like this quote-unquote QB battle is for the most part settled. Heading into fall camp, it did sound like Connor Harrell and Max Johnson, while it was kind of talked about that Max Johnson had the job in saying, but it really seems like Connor Harrell was right there with him and battling for it. It seems like that has kind of taken a step back over these past couple practices. So I believe North Carolina is in practice 5 right now. Over the past couple, Harrell has just struggled, and Max Johnson has looked really good. It seems like he's taken over in this past practice. He took all of the reps with the 1s, and Harrell was with the 2s. However, it has been talked about how Harrell really looked good in practice 5, and to some people's opinion, has actually looked better than Johnson. But it seems like there's been some miscommunication as well between the wide receivers and quarterbacks. But it really seems like the battle is starting to separate in favor of one Max Johnson. Moving over to SMU, Preston Stone has been extremely impressive, but I do want to bring up backup Kevin Jennings has apparently also looked really good. I don't know if Preston Stone's going to end up going off into the NFL after the season or not. If he does, Kevin Jennings is a guy that I would definitely invest in with what we think this SMU offense can be. Apparently, he has looked really, really good. He's not going to take over for Preston Stone unless there's an injury, but again, just want to point that out. Jordan Hudson seems to be the guy, has really kind of taken off along with RJ Maryland. They have really kind of been the 2 standouts so far throughout the SMU camp. And running back Rashad Smith as well. While most of his stuff he's been shining through special teams, apparently has really kind of set up as well. Had some really big runs to the outside, including one where he got up the middle, right through apparently like the A gap, then broke to the outside and beat everybody to the end zone. It was a big play. Everybody was kind of jumping and cheering. So Rashard Smith, we know they've got Jalen Knight in there as well. I don't know how they'll split up that backfield, but definitely interesting that he was named and talked about a few times. I got to stop doing that. Next up is Stanford. Elijah Brown is getting a lot of love from head coach Troy Taylor. Now, I don't think this is like we're talking about him so he doesn't transfer out kind of thing. I mean, he's a true freshman, but he was enrolled early, was in spring, and now through fall has just been really good. They've talked about he has made a ton of anticipation throws, thrown with a lot of zip and great accuracy. I mean, Troy Taylor was really pumping him up. He did say that he's still adjusting to the speed of the college game and kind of adjusting to the new level, but he's been extremely accurate, and that kind of anticipation throws and accuracy translates to all levels. He's been really impressed with him. Now, this next part I think is a little bit of coach speak. He did say that there is still, quote unquote, a quarterback battle between Miles Charlie, Elijah Brown, and he did say Ashton Daniels. I still think Daniels is going to be the guy, but I would really like to see Elijah Brown be the two. He doesn't quite bring that like rushing upside that Daniels brings. And we've seen Troy Taylor like to use from his, quarterbacks going back to Sacramento State and Asher O'Hara, who had like over 200 carries a couple years ago. But again, it's interesting to see that he likes him. They do run a fast-paced offense. So if you have a guy who's that accurate, willing to check down, could be an interesting fantasy viable option moving forward, depending on how long Ashton Daniels stays. Then I did want to mention freshman running back Cole Tabb, who apparently had a really good Tuesdays, looked really good, 5'8", 190-pound running back, but has a lot of speed. And actually the talk has been about him actually being a fairly physical runner. He's a power lifter and has used those, his strength in his legs and upper body to kind of push some guys around. But Micah Ford and Chris Davis, who are both also freshman running backs, have been impressive as well. So, I don't want to read too much into Tabb's big day. All three have gotten a little bit of love, but I did want to mention wide receiver Emmett Mosley. Ashton Daniels gave an interview recently saying that he believes he could win the Biletnikoff, that he's been explosive in and out of his breaks. He has been talked about a lot, not just by Ashton Daniels, but by the coaching staff as well. He's gotten a lot of love. We'll see what happens with him. This is a very interesting room. I don't know that he's going to kind of take over for anybody, but if he can break any of the year 1-0 thresholds, like I think he's going to be an interesting wide receiver to roster and kind of like watch over the next couple years, again, being in that Troy Taylor office. Cause I would think Alec, especially at least Alec A.O. Manor is going into the NFL after this year. So that could leave a spot open for Mosley. But I don't believe he was a top 300 ranked player. So technically the year 1-0 theory doesn't apply to him. Heading on over to Arizona State. So today, their practice report, Sam Levitt was with the ones with Cam Scatabo, Xavier Gilroy, Jordan Tyson, Melquan Stovall, and Markinston Douglas in at the tight end spot. And the reason I wanted to bring that up, there's a lot of talk about the other day, I think it was Monday's practice, where Sam Levitt was with the twos, and everybody was like, there's a Twitter Reddit thread going around, is Jeff Sims going to be the starting quarterback for Arizona State? Kenny Dillingham had this to say about that. They played Levitt with the second group on Monday after exclusively working him with the first group for the 4 first practices. A challenge Dillingham wanted him to face. He pretty much said Sam went with the twos and Sam probably had his best practice. I love that about him. A little adversity, and what happens, I'm going to show you. I'm going to go have my best day. Go ahead. Try and put me with the twos. See what happens. That's what Dillingham said about Sam Levitt. Said, now Jeff did have a good day before, and he's going to have some best days as well. He said, but I'm not going to let anybody try and take this away from me. And that's the mindset. That's the competitive spirit we want. Those are the guys we want, those dogs. Those are the dudes we love. Those are the dudes who we embrace and the dudes who embrace it. It's a lot of love for Sam Levitt after quote unquote being with the twos and a lot of people panicking. And the one big thing with the twos was he goes out there and like, it was a bunch of completions in a row, including a touchdown pass to Jake Smith, a long touchdown pass to Jake Smith. So I think it's pretty safe to say Sam Levitt's going to be the starter. Maybe it was a little bit overblown. Jeff Sims getting one practice with the ones. Heading on over to Arizona, Teteroa McMillan participated in individual drills for the first time today, August 7th, or the recording of this on August 7th, for the first time during camp, and looked just fine doing it. He did not participate in the team drills, but apparently definitely looked like if there was a game this Saturday, he would be able to play. So I think wheels back up for Teteroa McMillan. We can stop worrying so much about like what his possible season outlook could look like. Montana Lamonius Craig, though, has had a bunch of good practices as well, was really good in the one-on-one session today, getting a lot of separation and beating every corner that was marked up on him. And I did just also want to point out Noah Fafita apparently has been incredible throughout camp, really showing off his arm strength. And if you haven't told, we've moved into the Big 12 with Arizona State and Arizona. On to Baylor. I did a video for the channel when Daquan Finn transferred into Baylor, said I thought it was a really interesting landing spot for him, was kind of intrigued for him being here. He is still, quote unquote, in a battle with Sawyer Robertson for the job. As of today, for their camp report, they are still fighting for that job. I don't know if that's Dave Aranda coach speak. I would think it's not. We don't know. It's actually really hard to find some Baylor stuff, Baylor camp reports. And the only other thing I could find was redshirt freshman Bryson Washington seems to be impressing a lot. He has been mentioned through multiple camp reports as a guy who's really kind of stood out. So I don't know that he'll be, the guy this year with some of the other players, Dawson Pendergrass and everything in there, but possibly a guy for the future. BYU had their first camp day today. The only real nugget coming out of there was JoJo Phillips had a really impressive day, was the most impressive day in the most impressive player in day one of BYU camp. All right, heading on over to Houston. So the wide receiver rotation has been similar for the offense so far throughout the past couple of practices. It has been Manjack, Shoulders, Johnson, and Wilson. And when they go two tight ends, it has been Carr and York out there together. The sub-ends have been Muse, Devin Williams, and Kobe Young at wide receiver. Parker Jenkins has apparently looked incredible, but that's really it. Not a lot coming out of Houston's camp. It's kind of the same thing with Iowa State. Not a lot coming out. However, there's been a lot of talk about Army transfer Isaiah Alston, who seems to really be connecting with Rocco Beck. Those two have seemed to really kind of develop this chemistry over the past couple of days. They've connected for a lot of big plays. It seems like Rocco Beck is really kind of fixating on him. So maybe a player to watch out for. I don't really know what I would think about him, but he's been the wide receiver mentioned the most so far throughout Iowa State's camp. Oklahoma State, this one's interesting. I don't want to get one Austin Nace too excited, but obviously this room is loaded and has a ton of talent. But so far, through fall camp, the most impressive player has actually been redshirt sophomore Talon Cetron. He's been extremely explosive throughout the camps and specifically in a bunch of the drills that they were able to watch on Saturday. Now, maybe he's just a guy who plays really good in practice and can't do it in games. I don't know. So we've been hoping for Talon Cetron and it just hasn't happened. But it was interesting to note, I guess, just to see that he was at least doing something. Heading on over to TCU, Braylon James, Drake Dabney, and Savion Williams seem to be the names outside of Josh Hoover and Cam Cook that seem to be mentioned the most. It's interesting, obviously, with some of the other wide receivers they have there. But again, Braylon James and Savion Williams getting a ton of love, as well as tight end Drake Dabney through multiple reports. Just got two left, guys. Utah. So we all know that Cam Rising, going to be the starter this year, seems to be back, healthy, good to go, without an injury. He's going to have likely a very good season for Utah. What is interesting, they obviously they had Brandon Rose. They bring in freshman Isaac Wilson, Zach Wilson's younger brother, and transfer Sam Heward. Those three are currently in a battle for the backup, and it sounds like right now it's coming down to Heward and Wilson. Now, I don't know that I believe in Sam Heward to do it. Well, I can't remember where he just transferred. I was like Cal Polytech or something like that. But he was talked a lot about in this last practice report, seemed to be doing very good. He said that he's been humbled by his, so far his college career and everything. So will be interesting to see again. I mean, Isaac Wilson, highly rated recruit. I imagine he's going to be the guy, but that's not been confirmed and set in stone just yet. And I do want to mention just kind of the wide receivers here. Damian Alford is getting a lot of praise, as is transferred in from USC last year, Dorian Singer. Caleb Lawner as well, and on just his hands and catch radius, and Money Parks on his deep threat. They've just been hyping up all these wide receivers. I still think it's Brant Keithy or bust for this offense, but they seem to be really happy with their wide receiver core and what's going on. Last but not least, West Virginia. So they've only had a couple practices, but I want to bring up Darius Farmer, who missed a couple days due to a personal issue, has come back and has been apparently really good. They have had him in the slot, special teams. They've moved him around throughout the offense. He's been a guy who's been extremely impressive. So I just wanted to mention him, kind of maybe a name to watch right now in the West Virginia offense. All right, that's going to do it. My goal is to try and keep these under 30 minutes every day, every other day. I know for sure we'll at least probably be back Friday night with Big 10 and SEC camp news. Let me know in the comments if there's any teams that you want me to look at. I will also be doing Texas Tech. They didn't have any actual written content. There was videos and a podcast. So I'm going to go back and listen to those, and I'll bring you anything I can. They had like the first 5 days of spring camp on this podcast and also a video. So I'm going to go check those out. I'll report back on Texas Tech on Friday along with the Big 10 and SEC. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you like what we're doing here at Camps to Canton. Talk to you guys again.